I think the biggest challenge at the moment is that people jump into the cloud and they say, yes, it's great, adopt it, it's easy, a virtual machine in the cloud, and start doing stuff. The big problem is that very often when people within organizations and organizations themselves, as they drive these programs, is they're not thinking about security up front. Security is always thought of as an after effect, as a bolt-on. And that can be really dangerous, because as you move into the cloud, you are opening your attack surface. And by opening your attack surface, what you're doing is you're exposing yourself to greater vulnerabilities. Security within the cloud these days is really good, but you need to apply it, you need to adopt it. And basic mistakes can result in catastrophic results. So looking and planning security around your Agile, around your DevOps pipeline, making sure that you look at security as an enabler, as a driver towards making it work is really important. I would say automation, but really automation is one component. Automation within coding and development practices becomes really important within the Agile development frameworks. So looking at DevOps and Agile and how people are building applications in the cloud means that you want to bring in levels of automation. Applications are no longer these great big monolithic applications where you develop for months and then deploy. And any change that you do is a major release. These days, implementing and developing in the cloud is with microservices, and it means that you can release a small piece of code minute by minute. You can deploy information and code and applications in much smaller bites that work in relation with each other to actually drive the end state of what you're trying to achieve. And that means that as you are deploying code more frequently, automation becomes really important in terms of making sure that you can scan for vulnerabilities, you can patch for those vulnerabilities, you can take the problems that you're identifying through monitoring and scanning, that you can take that back into your pipeline through your CI/CD pipeline, looking at your Jira backlogs, looking at the controls that you drive in terms of making sure that the code is released in a more structured, more formal way. I would say that the top challenges at the moment is looking at making sure that the code that is used to drive transformation in the cloud is looked at and performed in a structured way. So making sure that the strategy, the definition of what is actually being trying to achieve, is well articulated, and look at the foundation, look at the basic elements, look at what is a normal security practice. It's no different in the cloud to what it is on premise. It just might take slightly different forms, but your authentication, your encryption, your controls that look at patching, your vulnerabilities, your scanning, your monitoring, all of those are the same. Make sure that the foundation is there. That I think is going to be the key thing. And really, when we start looking at it, it is the basic, simple mistakes that people make that is causing the problem. So get the foundation right, and that is, I think, one of the biggest driving factors. So where the challenge is at the moment is in that foundational element. Also, one of the things that we are seeing quite a big challenge at the moment is the transition from waterfall type approaches into this DevOps way. It's almost like a cult following, and people who are educated and trained and understand Agile and DevOps, the DevSecOps and all that sort of stuff, tend to be more of seen as cowboys and shoot by the hip rather than being structured. It's not the case. Decent approaches around how Scrum Masters control and manage their developers, how you burn down risk as you drive through delivery life cycles. All of the structure and the governance is there to make sure that you're doing the right things, but make sure that those right things are embedded into the program. Because of the transformational aspect of moving from waterfall to the DevOps way of working is so different. One of the biggest issues that we are seeing in our organizations at the moment and customers that we're helping with this is the ability for people to be able to transform their behaviors and their ways of working, cultural change, not just education, but how they actually go about doing stuff. That is one of the biggest challenges. And it's sometimes very difficult for a person to go from waterfall into DevOps what we've seen is that as organisations are driving this direction, you tend to get a lot of staff churn, people move off, and you get a whole new a bunch of people coming in. Those people with the ability to change, those people that embrace the culture, tend to excel and do really well. Great question, thanks. I think the first one's got to be around data management, because information security is intrinsically about the data, understanding what information exists where and managing it. Looking at that data is really important, number one. I think the other thing is looking at how you apply security within the information base across the IT organization, looking at security operations. I think when you start managing security assets and IT assets within an organization, and you look at how security is applied to it, very often from an operational perspective, security becomes an afterthought and a break fix. That break fix becomes a very tactical construct of security, and is not always the best approach, because it does leave vulnerabilities and exposure in those areas where it hasn't been addressed. Rather look at it strategically. So the strategic construct of security allows you to be able to drive a more holistic approach, a more consistent approach to how security is applied within the organization. I think the other thing that is really important is that when you apply that security, is to do it against a standards-based framework. So looking at something like ISO 27001 or NIST, or if you're moving into the cloud, look at the Cloud Control Matrix from the Cloud Security Alliance. There's great control frameworks out there that allow you to be able to understand what are all of the key elements that need to be addressed in order to look at security holistically within the organization, to look at it strategically, and then also to, when you look at your assets, your more strategic, your more critical assets, to be able to apply the right rigor and the right level of control within that. I think one of the other really important things is to take a step back and look at what does the estate look like in terms of security. And a great way to do that, one of the methods that we apply, is looking at a capability maturity assessment around it. Because when you look at capability, it allows you to be able to identify what are those capabilities that you have in place, from a people perspective, from a resource perspective, from technology point of view, and also process control. Those elements in terms of, do I have the right mechanics, the right things in order to be able to drive the right change within the organization, are important. And then looking at it from a maturity perspective, if I've got these things that are my resources, how effective are they in terms of managing security within the organization? And that gives you an ability to be able to start planning change in the right ways, in the right areas, in order to be able to improve security. Without a doubt, the CISO should be reporting to the board. And the reason for that is that information security is something that is intrinsic within every organization, every modern organization today. Information security is intrinsic in that business. There aren't modern organizations that can easily operate outside of the construct of information. Whether that information exists within people's minds, whether it is physical in terms of paper, or if it is in computer systems in the cloud or in a data center, that information exists as the backbone of an organization. And as it is the backbone of the organization, compromising that information can have huge ramifications on the organizations from a reputational point of view. The kind of change that you need to apply in an organization in order to be able to achieve policy can only be addressed from the top down. So when you look at those organizations that are the most successful in driving security principles and practices, they have a direct link back into the board, because that link carries the weight to be able to achieve change required to secure the information in the organization. I hate predicting things. I think it's very interesting, and it's a little bit challenging to actually try and pinpoint what it could be. I think that when you look at the things that are happening at the moment in the world, we are transforming as a society. It tends to focus on touching and feeling to be an organization that is more withdrawn. And as a result, what we've seen is a massive increase in terms of online shopping. We've seen more digital. We've seen more reliance on technology. And with that change in societal norms, it means that information is being driven in a certain direction. And that can be only where the attack surface is, and that is where the vulnerabilities come from. So it will be Internet of Things, it will be in the cloud, it will be around where the cheddar is. I think in terms of protecting information into the future, I think do the same things. Information security intrinsically has not changed in 20 years. If you look at ISO 27001 today, as it stands, it's not vastly different to BS 17799 as it existed nearly 30 years ago, in fact. So the actual control that you apply doesn't change. It is where you apply it and where you are putting your information that does. So make sure that you do the same things, apply the same rigor, the same governance as you would in traditional environments, as you would in some of these new cloud-based or Internet of Things type of environments. I would say in terms of identity and access management, the number one thing is that identity and access management is much akin to an ERP type program. It is transformational, not just at an IT level, but at an organizational level. It touches every single person, it touches every computer, and it touches every business process. And because of that, you need to consider what is the ramification of change on the organization. Change is the biggest driver to a successful identity management program. One of the other things that really make a big difference in terms of identity and access management is looking at and recognizing the importance around insider threat. Very often, most organizations, the media, and everybody who talk about cybersecurity, they talk about this big bad hacker or the syndicate sitting in Russia or something. Most of the time, your greatest threat is from within. And I know we want to trust, we want to believe in our staff, but that's where the biggest danger is. And it's not from your normal operational day-to-day staff. It is that one person that is disgruntled. It is that one person who is vulnerable. It is that one person who can be exploited. And that is where we need to think about it. If you look at FBI reports over the years, they have shown a very clear link between social engineering and fraud. So it's year on year, on average, around about 80% of fraud that takes place happens through internal collaboration and social engineering. And that's a startling figure. That means that even when a fraudulent act has been perpetrated by an external threat actor, that fraud is happening through collaboration by an insider. So the insider threat is a big issue. And we need to recognize it, understand it, and make sure we drive privileged account management, look at what people have access to, make sure that segregation of duties are enforced, make sure that mandates are clearly defined. Those are really important controls to drive.